fear of missing out? Subscribe to Geek Legion of Doom now.
We are talking Capture from 2026, and this is directed by Bruce Wemple. I've actually reviewed a few movies from Bruce Wemple before, and I've quite liked some of them. He has tended to do kind of creature features with Wendigo and Sasquatch movies. Here we have a kind of haunted house movie. So this kind of reminds me a little bit of the video game Project Zero, also known as Fatal Frame. It has a similar kind of hook in a way. So we have this woman who has been brought up in foster care. She's a little bit of a kind of a rebel, you might say. I think possibly down to her upbringing. A little bit of a kind of a flake in some ways. Anyway, she gets contacted to say that they've actually, some solicitors, some lawyers, have found out that there is actually a inheritance from her biological parents, this house out in the country somewhere. So she goes to investigate. No one kind of really wants to talk about this house because it has a dark history. We learn that there is a number of deaths that have occurred in this property. They mentioned that there was 13 bodies found in this house, for example. And they think the owners, her parents, particularly the mother, was a witch. Anyway, so after some sort of discouraging words from the locals, she ends up kind of going into this house, and she finds a video camera along with some cassettes that her mother appeared to be some type of psychologist, and she would videotape her kind of her patient, and there's also some kind of personal stuff, personal videos on there as well. And we learn that this this video camera may have been possessed by a demon, which was originally inhabiting one of her patients, and because he was being filmed, the demon has kind of transferred to this camera, and this has now caused this curse, if you like, this kind of supernatural problem in this particular house, which has caused all these deaths. And now it's up to our main character to figure out what's going on, what will happen. You have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works in this movie's favour. I've genuinely quite liked Bruce Wemple's movies. I mean, they're somewhat hit and miss, but more often than not, I've kind of liked a degree of them. So he's one of the kind of the lower budget B-movie filmmakers that I genuinely quite enjoy watching. So I'm kind of keen to kind of watch, his output ultimately. So how does this one stack up? It's a different movie in some ways in regards to its tone. I do think a lot of the previous Bruce Wemple movies that I've reviewed have a more of a schlocky feel to it, whilst this one is more of a, even though it's an independent film, it has a kind of Hollywoodized kind of sort of somewhat more mainstream sort of feel to it in regards to like a haunted house, like a kind of low budget sort of horror movie that you would sort of see that would play for one weekend in a cinema and things like that. It has that sort of more studio feel to it, is I guess what I'm saying. So it has a degree of polish to it. Not that it is a particularly flashy movie, but I do think the movie feels like a bit more of a mature film in some ways. It's not quite as schlocky as maybe some of Wemple's previous works. The way it's shot, it's more kind of slow paced, a little bit more of a sort of character work and things like this. It's not having these more sort of gratuitous monster shots and things like that. The horror is more subtle and kind of like, slightly out of focus and things like that. And it has the gimmick, as I say, the Fatal Frame style gimmick, where if you look through this camera, I mean, to use the words in this film, you can see ultimately hell. So you'll see like ghosts walking around, you'll see kind of blood on the walls and things like this. So I do think there's some interesting kind of stuff kind of going on. The movie actually has some subtly used but reasonable kind of VFX. You have that thing where, when she's watching these tapes, the people that get exposed to this camera have that thing where their mouth kind of expands, and we see this kind of this kind of almost demon rip the face apart and things. And it's done sort of in a pretty practical manner, I have to say. It looks pretty grotesque, I will say. The movie, as I say, is not a massive VFX extravaganza. It's actually used quite infrequently and relatively subtle. So I think when it is used, I think those sequences actually quite hit. I also think the movie has a good amount of kind of like creepy atmosphere. As I said, it has that kind of studio feel, that sort of studio feel, haunted house aesthetic that we've seen. Again, this isn't this is an independent movie, but it has that more of a feeling of a kind of studio mandated kind of sort of horror movie, lower budget horror movie that you'll kind of expect to see. So you know, you'll kind of enjoy the haunted house aesthetic. I think also we have a fairly interesting kind of central character with a good lead performance from our you know, our actress here, who makes our character kind of sympathetic, but also have a little bit of edge to her, but not to the point where it's kind of annoying. So I thought they could have got the balance quite right. I like the relationship with her kind of foster brother. It could have been a little bit more expanded upon, considering that ends up being quite a linchpin in the movie. But, you know, I still kind of quite enjoyed it. There's also a little bit of misdirect in regards to some of the other characters and what you think their kind of motivations are, and people might appear altruistic and they might not be, and things like that. So I sort of quite like some of the kind of the kind of the smaller, little kind of subtle character moments here. I think the central idea is a reasonably strong one, but there are some errors and some kind of plot holes that this movie, I think, doesn't really ever go over. So let me just kind of transition into what doesn't work, and let me kind of stay with that one. So the idea here is, as I say, that we have a haunted camera, basically, and a haunted sort of video camcorder. So I mean, I guess you could say it sort of bothers me when we have haunted technology to a degree, because it's just like, okay, so are we saying these ancient demons know how to use cameras? Where's the power source? And I guess you could hand wave it away and sort of say like, oh, it's supernatural. They do have a terrestrial kind of threat, I suppose, in this movie as well. So I suppose that you could kind of say that. Another issue is that, you know, we learn through the kind of this archive footage that there have been 13 bodies found in this house, and yet, you would have assumed that there would have been a big police presence here, but they haven't confiscated the camera or the tapes and things like that. Would have thought that would have been, considering what such a large amount of you know, bodies are recovered, you would have thought it would have been very, very in-depth police work done there, but apparently not. Also, in regards to police work, we learn that I won't kind of give too much away in this because it's a little bit of a spoiler, but we learn that there was some people were identified through dental records. It says we know who these people were because of dental records. And yet later on we're told that someone has faked their death by removing their teeth and kind of putting their teeth on you know, in the kind of the crime scene. Well, that's not how dental work. It's just a bunch of loose teeth. You would have to remove your whole jaw to be able to kind of like be identified via dental records. Just removing your teeth and sprinkling your teeth on the floor isn't going to be able to identify you in regards to dental records. So I thought that was a bit dumb. And speaking of dumb things, I think, why is this woman still in the house? I mean, there's a point where there is clearly a threat to life. There's clearly like she kind of has an inkling about what's kind of going on, but she's not ever kind of trying to kind of get out of there. She doesn't really try and sort of, you know, destroy the camera and things like this. You know, it just strikes me as a little bit sort of, we need the plot to go in a certain way, so we'll kind of just move ahead. I think the movie introduces a few kind of like red shirt characters that you know are there to be killed. So we introduced like someone who hasn't got a lot of screen time. Well, they're clearly going to die, aren't they? So again, no real surprises in regards to kind of things like this. I also wondered why she wasn't really kind of phoning the police. I mean, if she's looking through the video camera, the camcorder, about all this kind of spooky stuff, why didn't she look through her camera on her phone to see if that, you know, is the same? So there's a whole bunch of kind of logic issues here that I just feel are, you know, doesn't really make too much sense if you couldn't put too much kind of scrutiny over it. At the end of the day, I think it's it's somewhat of a kind of a well put together kind of haunted house movie, but not an especially original one, or one that, if under too much scrutiny, if you want to kind of really pick holes at it, stands up to scrutiny in regards to that. So the movie ends up being, you know, somewhat of a typical kind of found footage movie, and I think the elements here, like looking through the camera to see this other world, was never really like utilised to the degree. I mean, is it just this camera? I mean, we presume that it is, but the movie never sort of gives us that comparison and things like this. So, and in which case, why are we still hanging on to it? So, you know, it is what it is. It's a fair movie. It's probably like a one-time watch, I would suggest. I don't imagine this is a movie that anyone would particularly kind of want to re-watch necessarily. But it's a fair watch. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. I think it's fine if you like a kind of haunted house movie. It's, you know, certainly not a bad film, but I don't think it really elevates the kind of the material in any way as much as it could do. But, you know, still not a bad movie at the end of the day. 5 out of 10. What were your thoughts? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Subscribe now. It's the best decision.